Scott Dean Ponder was born on February 7, 1973, and was raised by his loving family, consisting of his mother Beverly Guy and his stepfather Terry Guy. From an early age, Scott showed interest in cars and motorbikes that was greatly supported by his parents, who wanted him to improve his riding skills. They even got him a racer's license when he turned legal. Young Scott started taking racing as a lifestyle, even participating at the Daytona Motor Speedway in Florida. His sharp skills and excellent racing earned him numerous admirers and turned him into a local hero in the town of Chesnee. Scott was also very social and preferred to hang out with large groups. People also loved Scott's company. Scott started the idea of the Superbike Motorsports first at his grandmother's backyard in the late 1990s, where he would repair bikes. Slowly, he started to upgrade his shop to a one-garage building in 2001. He even decided to take in his best friend, Brian Lucas, as his co-partner in the business, and the two young men started to expand their business further. They signed up with Suzuki for a dealership, and their business grew unexpectedly in a short period of time. Brian, who used to work part-time at the starting of the business, decided to leave this job to become a full-time manager of the store. With their hard work and knowledge, the pair started attracting a lot of customers, and the business started to bloom. Even though they were salesmen, they took utmost care when it came to their customers' knowledge about bikes or racing in general. Scott's mother, who first visited the store occasionally, now started to pay regular visits. Soon, she took up the job of taking care of the accounting, payroll, cash drops, and other such work. With the trio, the business boomed, selling 100,000 motorbikes every month. Scott decided to attend an industry convention in Chicago. It was during this trip that Scott met his wife Melissa Brackman, a former homecoming queen from Stafford High School. They immediately clicked and started to enjoy each other's company, thus meeting up with each other often. As their relationship grew stronger, they decided to get married. Their love life, both before and after their marriage, mirrored that of a fairy tale where the love grew stronger every passing day. To complete their family, Scott and Melissa decided to have a baby, but unfortunately for them, none of their attempts were bearing any fruit. Frustrated, the couple sought medical attention and advice, and finally, after months of struggles, Melissa was pregnant with a little baby boy in October of 2003. With millions of sales in the very first year of business, Scott knew he had to expand his store even more. In order to do this, he required more hands on deck and decided to hire a new mechanic, Chris Sherbert. Chris was quite well known around town for his skilled use of the wrench that attracted Scott towards him. The four of them, Scott, Beverly, Brian, and Chris, became a sort of a dream team, and their business started to gain attention even outside the small town of Chesnee. Everything was going perfectly for the young and talented Scott Ponder until the arrival of his doomsday. Living such a perfect life, Scott never imagined his happiness to be cut short, but this was what happened on November 6, 2003. It was a normal day with not a cloud in the sky, and the sun was beaming, but it was not the case at the Superbike Motorsports. Scott and the others started their day at the shop like any other. There were few customers browsing items in the store. One of them was Kelly Sisk, who had his 4-year-old son with him. He was going to buy a go-kart for his family, and after paying for it, he hung around in the shop for a little while longer. Brian actually had the day off because he was paying to go on a holiday with his family, but he was called in by Scott because there was a customer who said that the bike was not tended to as they promised. Brian came to the shop and immediately started to work on the customer's bike. Scott was tending to another customer when Beverly came by after taking Scott's cancer-stricken grandmother to chemo. She used to take deposits for her son to the bank, and that day she was intending to do the same. When she dropped by, she started to help Scott a little at the counter since she was planning to go to the bank much later. At around 2:30 p.m., Scott's friend Noah Lee called the shop. Beverly answered the phone and he asked if he could stop by the shop, and it would only take him 7 minutes for him to reach the shop, to which Beverly agreed. The conversation was short, and after putting the phone back down, Beverly decided to use the bathroom. In the span of 7 minutes, all 4 people in the shop, Scott, Brian, Beverly, and Chris, were savagely shot to death in the Superbike Motorsports premises. At 3 p.m., when Scott's friend Noah came by, he saw Scott and Brian lying at the front of the shop as still as statues. At first, he felt they were playing a trick on him. He even lightly kicked both of them, telling them to stop messing with him until he saw the pool of blood underneath their bodies and immediately dialed 911. Police and paramedics immediately rushed to the scene. After all, it was the first ever quadruple murder in such a small town like Chesnee. The news of the homicide spread like wildfire, and not only the victim's family, but a dozen other people gathered at the crime scene in order to catch a glimpse. The police wasted no time and immediately started their investigation. They found mechanic Chris's body at the back of the shop. It was bent over as if he was working on a bike right before he was robbed of his life. Next, they found Beverly's body inside the shop, right in front of the bathroom. The police believe she was ambushed right when she came out of the bathroom. The police found Brian and Scott's bodies both lying at the front of the store. Brian's body was closer to the door, near the sidewalk, while Scott's body was closer to one of the parked cars in the parking lot. This, the police inferred, was maybe because both Scott and Brian were trying to run for their lives. They went inside, probably on hearing the gunshots, and came face to face with the shooter. And on seeing the dead bodies of Chris and Beverly, they immediately ran out the door, but their attempt to escape failed miserably. The police and forensic teams searched the crime scene thoroughly and gathered blood samples and other evidence from the crime scene. This was an execution-style homicide, where the shooter entered the shop with the motive to murder the people present there and shot them in the chest and head point blank. Scott's wife Melissa got a call about the shooting and immediately rushed to the scene. Detectives conducted a thorough investigation, and it didn't take them long to arrive at their first clue. From the statements made by a few passerbys in the area at the time of the murder, they declared to have spotted a couple loitering near the shop. Sketches of the suspects were drawn during the questioning of these eyewitnesses, and the detectives immediately circulated the pictures all over South Carolina. The detectives speculated that the man was the one who shot the victims, Chris and Beverly, at the back, while the woman was distracting the two men, Scott and Brian, up front. When the man came to the front where the two men were, he shot them. This was just mere speculation by the detectives, and none of the facts in this theory were proven. Months passed, and police couldn't find any clue regarding the case. Extensive media coverage of the case started putting pressure into the detectives as they started to revisit the crime from a different perspective, and sure enough, a breakthrough appeared. Detectives started to do a thorough study of the victims' past and current lifestyles, and though Scott, Beverly, and Brian's backgrounds came out to be clean, it was not the same for the mechanic, Chris Sherbert. When detectives checked Chris's previous job, the news of a drug connection came into the picture. The detectives found out that Chris might have been involved with the wrong company and was also responsible for smuggling drugs. Moreover, Chris was scheduled to go to court the following Monday before the murder took place. It was 2003 when drug smuggling and abuse was increasing every single day, and the police were hoping to arrest the key criminal players to eradicate the root cause of drug abuse, especially among young teens. The detectives and the public now started to wonder if this quadruple homicide took place with the motive to murder only Chris, and the other three victims were just collateral damage. They even started to speculate that maybe the people involved in this drug business felt that Chris would give evidence against them in court on Monday and decided to end his life. The detectives said that this could be a possibility since Chris was the one who was shot first. However, regarding this path of speculation, no evidence was found by the police. Therefore, the investigation stalled again. Finally, after a whole year, the detectives approached the case from a completely different angle once again. The detectives found that Brian, Scott's friend and co-worker, was looking for a house weeks before the murder, but strangely enough, his wife Robin had no idea regarding this decision taken by him. Later, Brian's mother, Lorraine Lucas, spoke of the unhappy and strained marriage between the pair and how Brian was planning to move out to live alone. Though this didn't seem to have a connection to the shooting, a discovery made by the detectives a few days later brought out a shocking revelation to the case. This quadruple homicide took the lives of 4 people and broke the hearts of many others. The victims' families were coping with the hard times, but it was especially hard for Melissa. Her life was perfect before it all came crashing down when her beloved husband was shot. Despite all this, Melissa knew she couldn't give up now that she had a new reason to continue living, and that was her son. When Melissa's son, Scott Ponder Jr., was born in June 2004, Melissa was still being called upon by the police at intervals for interrogation. In one such incident, the police collected the DNA sample of Scott Jr. from a discharged diaper when Melissa had changed him at the station itself. The results of the DNA test left everyone dumbfounded. According to the reports, Scott Jr. was not the child of Scott, but Brian, since his DNA matched with Brian's found at the crime scene. This created tension between Melissa and her father-in-law, William Ponder, who kept asking her if this was true. The detectives started to approach this case from the point of a possible love triangle between Scott, Melissa, and Brian. Questions about her being unfaithful to her husband spread all throughout the neighborhood. Moreover, Brian's mother stated that it was possible for Brian to have an affair, considering how unhappy Brian was in his marriage, and the thought of divorce might have crossed his head at times. Melissa was called multiple times to the police station for interrogation about her affair, but she was resolute. She said that both she and Scott had struggled a lot to conceive this baby, and Scott Jr. was undoubtedly Scott Ponder's child. She later told about how she was harassed every day by the same questions when she knew it was hers and Scott's baby. For the next year and a half, detectives kept track of every move made by Melissa in order to find a breakthrough. Finally, after 18 months, however, the detectives claimed that there must have been a mistake regarding the blood sample collected at the crime scene. The detectives stated that they conducted a DNA test for Beverly and Scott from the blood sample collected from the crime scene, and the results did not match. In the reports, Brian's DNA matched Beverly's when clearly Scott was the son of Beverly. At this point, the detectives knew that they'd made a grave mistake. They put the wrong name in the blood sample of Scott and Brian collected from the crime scene, since both the bodies of Scott and Brian were lying next to each other. This cleared up all the accusations laid against Melissa. Disregarding the love triangle theory, detectives now started to link the case with another homicide, just 30 miles away, that had happened just 5 months before the Superbike Motorsports homicide. On May 16, 2003, the people of Greer, South Carolina heard the news of a triple homicide that took place in the Blue Ridge Savings Bank. Sylvia Holtz-Claw was on duty that day, though she had a day off. Soon a local couple, Eb and Maggie Barnes, visited the bank. At around 1:30 p.m., a 911 call went through to the Greer Police Department regarding a shooting that had taken place in the Blue Ridge Savings Bank, where Sylvia, Eb, and Maggie were shot to death. Just like in the Superbike Motorsports, the shooting happened in broad daylight with no witnesses available. When police checked the CCTV footage, they saw a red car that was driving to the bank at around 1:24 p.m., and it was seen again when it was driving back from the bank 3 minutes after the incident. Coincidentally, a similar red car was spotted during the quadruple homicide at the Superbike Motorsports. Detectives started to hunt down the right car and found a clue that it was stolen by 39-year-old Emerson Wright from a rental lot days before the homicide. The police concluded that he'd entered the bank to rob, but panicked and shot the couple when they tried to intervene. Unfortunately, the detectives never got to question Emerson regarding the bank and the Superbike Motorsports murder because of how incidents unfurled 2 years later in another car chase involving him and the Georgia State Police. He was wanted for a series of burglaries in the Atlanta area. When he was chased by the state trooper, he crashed his car, got out, and shot himself with a single gunshot wound to his head. Later, the detectives declared that though there are similarities between the two cases, they didn't believe that the two cases were connected. Left with no clues or possible theories to continue their investigation, the quadruple homicide at the Superbike Motorsports turned into a cold case months later in 2004. For 13 years, Melissa, along with the other families of the victims, didn't stop with their efforts of finding any clue that might lead them to the person who was responsible for this atrocious crime, but to no avail. Finally, a ray of hope shone on them when the cold case of the quadruple murder that took place on November 6, 2003 in Superbike Motorsports reopened when the detectives got a breakthrough in the case in 2016, 13 years after the crime had been committed. The man behind the shooting came into the spotlight when he was arrested for a different murder that he committed, and during the interrogation, he confessed to the Superbike Motorsports quadruple murder. This man was 45-year-old Todd Kohlhepp. Todd was born on March 7, 1971, to mother Reggie Tague and father William Samsel. His parents divorced when he was 2 years old, and though he started to live with his mother and a new boyfriend, he wanted to spend more time with his biological father. Todd was extremely aggressive and hyper, at times not having self-resistance over his anger issues. He was a troublesome kid and showed hostility towards animals when he was in nursery school. He killed a goldfish with Clorox bleach and shot a dog with a BB gun. He spent 3.5 months in Georgia Psychiatric Hospital, but there seemed to be no change in his aggressive behavior. His mother, Reggie, finally decided to send him to his father, William, hoping a change in the environment would help his behavior. On November 25, 1986, Todd planned a kidnapping of a girl named Christy Granado in Tempe, Arizona. He knocked on her door, threatened her with a .22 caliber revolver, and demanded for her to follow him to his house. He brought her to his home, tied her up, taped her mouth shut, and then proceeded to assault her. Afterwards, he walked her home and threatened to kill her entire family if she told anyone about what had happened. Christy, however, confessed everything to her parents, and her father called 911 immediately. Kohlhepp was charged with kidnapping, sexual assault, and committing a dangerous crime against children. In 1987, he pleaded guilty to the kidnapping charge, and the other charges were dropped. When he was released, Todd was a changed man. He started to work for himself and even got a job. No further complaints were heard against them until 2016. On August 31, 2016, 30-year-old Calla Brown and her boyfriend, the 32-year-old Charlie David Carver, went missing after they were last seen going to Todd's house to remove brush from one of Todd's properties. On November 3, 2016, investigators found Calla chained to a wall inside a metal storage container on the property of Todd. Later, investigators also retrieved the body of Charlie that had multiple gunshot wounds in it. Calla told the detectives that Todd shot Charlie and took her chained up. He would always assault her in a barbaric manner and threatened her not to find ways to escape. Todd was immediately arrested by the police and taken in for questioning. During this arrest, Todd confessed to being the person behind the shooting that took place at the Superbike Motorsports 13 years earlier. When Todd was called in for the interrogation on November 5, 2016, he started to tell the detectives everything that happened on November 6, 2003. He didn't confess out of fear or guilt, but merely as if recalling a memory. He said that he bought a Suzuki GSXR 750 from Superbike Motorsports, but just days after buying the bike, he realized he couldn't ride it. Having no prior knowledge of riding a bike, Todd then decided to exchange the bike for another one that would be much easier to ride for a beginner such as Todd. He then told the detective that he was mocked by Scott and Brian for his inability to ride such a bike. The bike exchange didn't take place that day, and Todd returned home. 14 days after the purchase, the bike got stolen from the front of the apartment complex where Todd lived. He filed a police complaint regarding the stolen bike, but the police never found the vehicle. Todd also mentioned that even the law enforcement officer made fun of him. He lost a $1,000 deposit for insurance, but neither the police nor the shop contacted him after that regarding the stolen bike. Todd started college and went to Greenville Tech. His attraction towards bikes never faded, and soon he found himself going back to the Superbike Motorsports once again. He told the police that when he was browsing through the bikes in the shop, both Scott and Brian were giving negative remarks about him. Since then, whenever Todd visited the shop, the two men would mock and laugh at him. One day, he decided to take a Beretta 92 FS with him when he went to the shop. He waited for the customers to leave, and the shop was left with only Scott, Brian, Chris, and Beverly. Todd savagely shot all the victims to death. Though later he added that Beverly was not a target. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Hearing the confession made by Todd gave the victims' families the long-drawn justice and the closure that they were seeking for the past. Later, Todd also confessed to have killed 3 more people who were Johnny Joe and Megan Lee Coxey and Charlie David Carver. These 3 victims also died due to gunshots fired by Todd Kohlhepp. In the case of Todd Kohlhepp, even though it was a serial killer case, there was no trial that took place. Instead, prosecutors spoke to the families of those he'd murdered as well as to the survivor and decided to give him a plea deal instead of taking him to trial, where the state offered Todd life without the possibility of parole, which he accepted only 7 months after his arrest. Todd was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences on May 23, 2017. In addition, he was sentenced to 30 years for assault and 30 years for kidnapping. Not having a trial did not give the satisfaction to the victims' families regarding the justice that was needed to be served. It also angered the general public. It's not fair for families to wait years and years for justice, Seventh Circuit solicitor Barry Bangap later told reporters. But Scott Ponder's wife Melissa said that she was finally relieved to get closure regarding her husband's death after all these years. All the family members and relatives of the victims came together to hold a candlelight vigil in remembrance of their beloved ones whom they'd lost to the hands of a serial killer. After 13 drawn-out years of pain and suffering, the victims' families were grateful to finally learn what exactly happened to their loved ones. In one interview, Scott's wife Melissa did state that the reason Todd gave for murdering Scott and the others didn't sit right with her, since she knew Scott well enough to know that he'd never make fun of someone and make them feel little in front of him. Nevertheless, she was grateful that justice had finally been served. The public was left disturbed by the lack of empathy and the casual behavior that Todd showed while being interrogated by the police or during his court appearances. They wanted Todd to receive the death penalty since he was a monster to society. Today's case was truly a twisted and disturbing one. Today, we will visit Dallas, a modern city with a cosmopolitan spirit and southern charm. It is widely known for its skyscrapers, upscale shopping, restaurants, and rich cultural life. There are many historic districts, such as the West End with its late 19th century buildings and futuristic landmarks, shimmering glass towers and skyscraper spires that serve as the city's main landmarks. Dallas is a city where modern metropolitan life is infused with natural beauty. There are more than 30 parks in different parts of the city. The Gable Park residential complex is located at the epicenter of Dallas chic. Living here itself offers a vibrant, exclusive lifestyle and exquisite, unique experiences. The high-rise building is elegant in appearance, has a parking garage and concierge. It is a vibrant and luxurious apartment building with a landscaped saltwater pool, fitness studio, and gourmet coffee bar in uptown Dallas. It's a quiet and safe place with no crowds of tourists or neighborhood residents strolling by. On September 2nd, 2015, at 07:42 p.m., a car entered the Gable Park parking lot. The car parked, and a beautiful young woman got out. She had a shopping bag in her hands. She slammed the door shut, stepped away from the car, and a minute later, 2 gunshots rang out. With the business completed, the dark figure quickly jumped into a black Jeep Cherokee that pulled up and fled the apartment complex. Local resident Hashem Saad, who was walking to the parking lot to pick up his car, saw the injured woman and called the emergency services. Officers arrived at the scene of the tragedy and found the injured woman. Unfortunately, she was already dead. The victim turned out to be 35-year-old Kendra Hatcher. Kendra K. Hatcher was born February 3, 1980 to Reagan Hatcher and Bonnie Gibson Jameson Colley in Springfield, Sangamon County, Illinois. Her parents divorced and her mother married Bruce Jamieson. She was not an only child. She had 3 sisters, Jamie Kaufman, Ashley Lipscomb, Melissa Jameson, and 1 brother, Neil Hatcher. She grew up in Pleasant Plains and studied dentistry there. After her divorce in 2010, she moved to Dallas, where she began working at Smile Zona Dental Studio. Kendra had a strong Christian faith and wanted to use her dental skills to help others. For example, the clinic provided services to disadvantaged children completely free of charge. In her spare time, Kendra taught Bible studies and participated in volunteer programs that included building churches overseas and providing free dental services to children in Ecuador. Dallas was welcoming to the young professional. Kendra's professional life quickly gained momentum, and her personal life flourished as well. On May 24, 2015, Kendra began dating Dr. Ricardo Paniagua. Kendra and Ricardo met through a dating app, and from their first date, they were inseparable. They both had similar values, interests, and wanted the same things in life. Ricardo was finishing his residency in dermatology at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. And even though they had only been in a relationship for a few months, the young men were already discussing their upcoming marriage. However, an incident in a parking lot took the life of his beloved woman and cut short all future plans. Investigators who arrived at the scene of the massacre examined the crime scene and put forward the version of robbery. as Kendra's purse and some valuables were missing. Bullet fragments and a gun magazine were found on the ground next to her body. However, the manner of shooting and the traces of the gunshot pushed the robbery version to the background. One bullet struck the woman in the back and the other in the head. The entry wound from the bullet was at the top of the head and it exited through the chin, indicating that Kendra had her hands up and behind her head when she was shot. The murder theory was confirmed when it was possible to obtain CCTV footage and reconstruct a picture of what happened. The footage shows a black Jeep Grand Cherokee pulling into the parking lot at 07:15 p.m. Half an hour later, Kendra returns home and drives into the same garage. A few minutes later, a man approaches her, shoots her, and runs to the side, after which he jumps in and black Jeep on the move. The videos were of poor quality and the crime scene itself was not visible on them. It was impossible to identify the assailants, but the vehicle was put on a wanted list. It was decided to place the camera footage, images of the Jeep and the driver in the media. The authorities appealed to the public for help, and it helped. Police were contacted by a man named Jose Luis Ortiz. He reported that the car in the footage belonged to him. But Jose wasn't involved in the shooting and he wasn't driving it. When questioned, Jose explained that on the morning of September 2nd, he was approached by two of his girlfriends, Brenda Delgado and Crystal Cortez. They asked Jose to repair their car and, in return, to lend them his Jeep until the evening. The man agreed. He also said that later that evening, Brenda called Jose to a restaurant where they were at the time of the crime. Crystal Cortez, later that evening, drove the Jeep to Jose's house, so the man was quite surprised when his Jeep made the news. When Jose saw his Jeep on the TV program, he asked Brenda about it. She first said that it was a different Jeep on the screen. Then Brenda explained that Crystal had been traveling somewhere on her business and she didn't know about it. Brenda Delgado suggested that Jose not tell anyone anything and to simply repaint the Jeep. She was willing to pay to paint the Jeep. Jose was awaiting a decision on his U.S. citizenship and did not want any trouble with the police. He realized that Brenda had set him up. So Jose went to the police again and testified again. So the police tracked all the movements of the Jeep that day and found the two young women whose names Jose had given them. Brenda Delgado was the first person investigators called in for questioning. The woman told police that she never knew Kendra Hatcher and had never seen her before. When asked where she was on September 2nd at 07:42 p.m., Brenda stated her alibi because she was at Chili's restaurant with Jose. Brenda even provided receipts for the dinner. But how often, and more importantly, what do you keep dinner receipts for? So gradually, assembled in minute detail, the truth that the participants in the crime tried to hide was revealed. The central figure in the investigation was Brenda Delgado. She was born into a fairly simple family, Luis and Maria Delgado, who immigrated to Dallas from Mexico, where her father was a factory worker. They found a home in a low-income neighborhood in southeast Dallas. It was then that Luis found a job in construction, and his wife worked at the U.S. Post Office cleaning houses. Brenda was their second child and their only girl. Not only was she an excellent student who was loved by her teachers, but she also worked part-time at a flower store and as a waitress. Brenda was very ambitious and dreamed of going to medical school someday. But the sad reality was that her parents couldn't afford the expensive tuition. So after graduating from Skyline High School in 2000, she continued to live with her parents, only dreaming of an affluent and beautiful life. On the way to her goal, Brenda worked hard. She was a dental assistant, and alongside that, she worked at a day spa in North Park Center where she whitened her teeth. In 2012, Brenda met Ricardo Paniagua and fell in love with him. Their first date was at a Jennifer Lopez concert and was like her dream date. In November 2012, 3 months after they met, Brenda moved in with Ricardo at his home in Fitzhugh Urban Flats. The man was also charmed by Brenda so much that he even met her parents. In 2013, she uploaded a post in honor of his birthday on Facebook where she wrote words of congratulations. "Happy birthday to the most amazing and smartest man I know. Ricky, together we have shared so much happiness. You are my best friend. I love you with all my heart and can't imagine life without you." Brenda then found out she was pregnant, but at Ricardo's insistence, she terminated the pregnancy, which left her heartbroken. A little recovered from the decision, Brenda decides to devote herself to her career and her beloved Ricky. In the fall of the same year, she enrolled in Sanford. At first glance, it seemed that Brenda had gotten over the emotional blow of the breakup. However, this was not the case. Brenda's painful dependence on Ricardo only gained momentum. And when Ricky posted a joint photo on social media with his new lover Kendra, who looked like a photo model, Brenda was up to something terrible. Many who knew her testified that Brenda dreamed of getting rid of Kendra. After obtaining information about Brenda and her personal life, investigators were able to surmise that the offended woman had a motive to get rid of her rival. Ricardo confirmed that Brenda Delgado was his ex-girlfriend. They dated intermittently from 2012 to 2015. They broke up a few months before Ricky and Kendra met. Ricardo was confident that he and Brenda remained friends and saw no problems between Brenda and Kendra. After all, he had been on dates with other women before meeting Kendra. And why would it be meeting Kendra that would turn Brenda's mind? However, the picture of the reconstructed events confirmed how insidious and cruel an abused woman can be. Brenda Delgado thought she had devised the perfect plan to win back her former lover and rid him of the superfluous figure, Kendra Hatcher. At first, she established communication with Ricardo, pretending to be his best friend, provided all kinds of support, was interested in how he and Kendra are progressing in their relationship. Secretly, she knew everything about their plans for the future, and Ricardo believed that this is a sincere interest. But it's a shame that men know women so poorly and sometimes blindly trust them. After Ricardo learned that Kendra had died, he shared his grief with Brenda via text message. And she supported her friend in every way possible and offered to do anything for him. Ricky had no way of guessing his ex's true motives. As it turned out, Brenda had been playing her own game for months. She had opened Ricardo's mail and knew about all his plans with Kendra, even where and when they had booked tickets. All of this was infuriating to Brenda. She longed to be rid of Kendra Hatcher, truly believing that she had taken her place. Brenda transferred Ricardo's account to her phone and kept tabs on him. Following Ricky and Kendra practically became her raison d'etre. Brenda became completely dependent on the stalking. She quit her job and devoted all her time to realizing her goals. Over time, a cruel and terrifying plan was born in Brenda's mind: to kill the hated Kendra and take her place beside her lover. For its realization, Brenda addressed to many of her acquaintances with an offer for money to harm Kendra Hatcher. Thus, through mutual acquaintances, she found a single mother 21-year-old Crystal Cortez, who, because of the big financial problems, just for $500 was ready to help her. At Brenda's behest, Crystal found the perpetrator, a man named Christopher Love, who agreed to commit the crime. Crystal handed Christopher $500 from Brenda, as well as 2 types of illegal substances. Two women followed Kendra to learn her habits and daily schedule. to further select the location and time of the crime. On September 2, 2015, they took Jose's car. Crystal and Christopher Love waited for Kendra in the parking lot. They did not pursue her on her way home from work because they were afraid of falling behind her in traffic. In the evening, the criminals completed their devious plan and were rewarded for a job well done. A few days after the crime, Crystal Cortez and Christopher Love were apprehended. The suspects denied their guilt and their presence at the scene of the crime. However, the situation changed when Love was found to have the gun that killed Kendra in the side compartment of the car. Crystal, on the other hand, was nervous and constantly confused in her testimony, telling different stories about the reasons for the appearance of the SUV in different parts of the city. So, at the first interrogation, Crystal admitted that she was the woman who was driving in the parking lot, but she arrived there at the will of an armed carjacker who got into the SUV and forced her into the parking lot that evening. She, wishing to remain innocent, gave false testimony, saying that her son was in the car with her. But this information was later not confirmed because no child was recorded on the cameras. As the interrogation continued and more evidence became available, Crystal changed her testimony and wanted to make a deal with the investigation. She agreed to testify and testify against Brenda in exchange for less time. She told police that Brenda wanted Kendra dead and the crime was her idea. According to Crystal, within 2 weeks of her meeting with Brenda, they began planning the crime. The police discovered that Brenda wasn't just unhappy that her relationship with Ricardo was over. She was obsessed and desperate to win him back. She pretended to Ricky that she was happy to be his loyal friend, but her life began to fall apart. She began to resent Kendra, believing that she had taken her place. According to Crystal, it was at this point that Brenda decided that she wanted to get rid of Kendra Hatcher. The perfect crime plan emerged in Brenda Delgado's mind. In testimony, Crystal detailed how Brenda devised the perfect crime. Enlisting each other's support, Brenda and Crystal began to formulate a plan to kill Kendra. They met many times and developed many plans. The original plan was to inject Kendra with illegal substances or sedatives and then get rid of her. But to avoid being under suspicion, Brenda needed a reliable enforcer and began looking for one. They drove around the scraggliest neighborhoods and asked a few people if they could help. That's how they met Christopher Love. He agreed to help and took an active part in deciding the modus operandi of the crime. The trio unanimously decided that the best way to kill was to shoot him because it was quick. While cooperating, Crystal revealed that the date of September 2nd was not chosen at random. Brenda knew that Kendra and Ricardo were planning a trip to Mexico, so it was decided to get rid of the woman before the happy vacation. Brenda told Crystal that she wanted the crime to look like a botched robbery. Next, the criminals chose the location of the massacre. For days, they desperately tracked Kendra's movements and recorded her minute by minute to make sure nothing changed on the appointed day. After work, they traced her route home and figured out how to discreetly enter the apartment complex's secure parking garage. On September 1st, 2015, they made a final check. On the day of the crime, early in the morning, Brenda and Crystal picked up the Jeep from Jose, then picked up Christopher along the way. Brenda was dropped off at the library in Carrollton so she would have an alibi, and Crystal and Christopher went to Kendra's apartment complex. They waited across the street for about 30 minutes, then drove to Kendra's place of employment. After waiting for their victim, they followed her but lost her in traffic, however. They returned to the house first and waited there. As soon as Kendra drove in, Christopher got out of the car. He was wearing gloves, approached Kendra with a gun, and shot her when she got out of the car. According to Crystal, she did not actually see the shooting but heard it. Crystal then drove Christopher home, picked up her son from his grandmother on the way, and later met Brenda at Chose's house where she handed him the Jeep. Thus, Brenda's dream came true. She was rid of her hated rival, and all she had to do was wait for her beloved Ricardo's message. Brenda was happy that she had managed to pull off the perfect crime. Crystal's candid confession and testimony against Brenda left no doubt about Brenda Delgado's guilt, and a warrant for her arrest was promptly issued. But when police officers arrived with the warrant, she was no longer at home. Having dual citizenship, Brenda Delgado fled to Mexico. After fleeing, Brenda's involvement in a contract killing became apparent, and she was put on a wanted list. On April 6, 2016, the FBI placed her on the list of most wanted fugitives, assigning a reward of $100,000 for information about her. So Brenda Delgado became the only woman on the list at the time and the 9th woman on the list ever. But just 2 days later, in Torreon, Coahuila, she was apprehended by Mexican authorities and extradited to the United States on October 6th. Mexico agreed to extradite Brenda, but only on the grounds that she would not face the death penalty. When she was extradited back to the United States, she was formally charged with capital murder. Brenda was extradited to Texas, and she was brought to trial. Hearings in the case began in 2017. The grief-stricken relatives of Kendra and Ricardo did not hesitate to express themselves during the court appearance. The oil was added to the fire by witnesses who confirmed Brenda's intentions and her dangerous obsession with her former lover. Brenda's cousin, Moses Martinez, spoke in court about his sister's depression after the end of her and Ricky's relationship. He also revealed that Brenda offered to pay him if he hit Kendra with a baseball bat. He refused to do so. Brenda's friend, Jennifer Escobar, testified at trial that Brenda was obsessed with Ricardo and read all of his emails and tracked his movements on her phone. She told the jury that Brenda even kept a copy of his house key and had access to his bank accounts. Jennifer revealed that Brenda had asked her to help eliminate the hated Kendra Hatcher too. She also told the court that Brenda wanted her to either inject her with something lethal or use a bat and leave her in a coma. For her help, Brenda offered to give her $2,000, a car, and illegal drugs if she would do it. Jennifer discussed the offer with her parents and then refused. It is quite strange that adults, having been offered the suggestion to harm or kill someone, contemplated doing so, and none of them went to the police to report a threat to a person's life or health. The court heard evidence about obsession from a number of people who knew Brenda. So the court found that Brenda had a motive to want Kendra dead. She saw her as an obstacle to getting what she wanted, and she wanted only one thing: to get back to Ricky. The court received corroboration that in the months leading up to Kendra's death, Brenda became increasingly obsessed. As evidence of Brenda's involvement, an ATM withdrawal receipt in the amount of $500, which she subsequently gave to Crystal for doing the work, was presented at the hearing. Christopher Love received a cash payment in the amount of $600. The cell phone data provided also indicated that Brenda, Crystal, and Christopher were together prior to the crime. More than 99 calls were recorded between Brenda and Crystal between August 22 and September 4th, proving their constant communication to discuss the plan to kill Kendra Hatcher. The defendant's attorney tried to shift much of the blame to the perpetrators, but it didn't work. The defense argued that Brenda was not at the scene of the crime. She had an alibi and receipts confirming her presence at the restaurant at the time of the crime. Brenda herself did not plead guilty, but the jury thought otherwise. It took them only 30 minutes to find Brenda Delgado guilty of the murder of Kendra Hatcher. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Christopher Love, the direct perpetrator of the crime, pleaded guilty and was sentenced to death via injection. Crystal Cortez, in exchange for cooperating with the investigation and pleading guilty, received a sentence of 35 years in prison with parole eligibility. The family of Kendra Hatcher was satisfied with the court's decision and silently withdrew from the courtroom after the verdict. The Delgado family did not believe to the last that their Brenda could be involved. They knew her as a loving daughter and woman, healthy and with good family and Christian values. I hope this cautionary tale of female perfidy and mentally unhealthy obsessive love will leave a mark on every woman's soul and serve as a cautionary tale in new love relationships, for no man is worth a human life. Take care of yourself and be careful.
Costa Mesa 911.
There's a body in my social apartment.
There's a what?
A body. A dead body.
A dead body?
Except there's been some sexual activity. She's dead. There's blood from her head.
There was blood from her head?
Yeah.
On May 21st, 2010, a young woman was found murdered in the apartment of 26-year-old Army veteran Sam Hare. When Sam's father discovered the gruesome scene, they frantically dialed 911. Then I walk you to the bedroom. And that's where I saw a body, a large lot of blood. I immediately called 911, but Sam was nowhere in sight. Who was that woman and what happened to her? Was Sam on the run after killing her? Located halfway between Los Angeles and San Diego, Costa Mesa, California lies on a coastal highland overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Despite its affluence, it's a laid-back beach community at heart. No one anticipated that this beautiful place would be where Julie Kibuishi would meet her horrific end. Sam Hare's parents, Stephen and Raquel Hare, became concerned when they hadn't heard from their son in a while. Sam was supposed to go to his parents' house that weekend, but he never showed up. On May 22, 2010, Stephen went to Sam's apartment along with his wife. There, a horrendous scene was awaiting them. Sam, what happened? What did you do? Panic-stricken, he immediately dialed 911. In this frantic call, Steve alerted the police that there was a dead woman lying face down in his son's bedroom with some of her clothes ripped off and blood coming down from her forehead. Curfin, I've been into the eye, in a white body, and get on a dead body. If you've been hurt, what can you day? Related, Eric, what I'm her head. It would be a wedding cuddle, but you know where you're starting. However, Sam was nowhere in sight. The incident came as a shock for the Costa Mesa community, where murders are very rare. When police reached the apartment, they did not find any signs that a struggle had taken place. Immediately as you walk in, you could tell it was a bachelor type apartment. It was a teen apartment. There was no signs that there may have been a struggle or maybe a fight that had gone on. The apartment seemed to be filled with items you'd find in a typical bachelor pad. Empty beer bottles, burned cigarettes, a patio barbecue. But it looked relatively clean and neat. That is, until they entered the bedroom. Then in the bedroom, which begins to look a little suspicious, on the bedside table, there's an unused knife and there's a couple of books. One of them a combat how-to, another the wonders of sex. But then when you turn to the bed, a horrendous son. The bed was soaked red from the victim's blood. The deceased woman was lying partially on the bed and partially kneeling on the ground. Her pants were pulled down, exposing the lower portion of her body. From the looks of it, detectives concluded that she might have been sexually assaulted before her death. She died from 2 gunshot wounds to her head. He had 1 gunshot wound, top, center of the head. There was also a knife on the bedside table, but it appeared to be unused. Strangely, she was wearing a tiara, and scrawled on the back of her sweater were the words, "All yours." Her bag was found in the kitchen. From her driver's license, detectives identified the victim as 23-year-old Julie Kibuishi. Julie Kibuishi was born on Valentine's Day, 1987, to Japanese-American parents, June and Masa Kibuishi. Ju was the third of 4 children and their first daughter. She'd always been referred to as my Valentine girl by her parents. From a very young age, Julie took a keen interest in dancing music. Her mother said Julie started tap dancing when she was just 5, and that passion only grew over the years. According to her friends and family, she was a pleasure to be around. Her goofy and bubbly personality made everyone laugh. Not only did she exude positivity, but she often bent over backwards to help a friend in need. On one hand, she respected her Japanese culture, but on the other, she was a free-spirited, all-American girl. After graduating high school from the Orange County School of the Arts, Julie went on to study fashion design at Orange Coast Community College. Here, she met 26-year-old Sam Hare, and the two became close. She also tutored him in anthropology. She did not know that her kindness would cost her life. After scouring through the crime scene, detectives tried to piece together what had happened to this bright and beautiful young woman. All signs pointed to Sam being her killer. It was, after all, his apartment that she was found in, and now he was nowhere to be found. It was time for investigators to take a closer look at Sam Hare. Samuel Hare was born on May 29, 1983, to parents Steve and Raquel Kalberman in Los Angeles, California. As the only child to his special education teacher father and stay-at-home mother, Sam was doted on. He was very close to his parents, visiting them often even after he'd moved away. Although Sam's physical stature was big and strong, his friends described him as a big teddy bear. He was a fun-loving and easygoing guy. At a very young age, Sam had enlisted in the United States Army and served a tour of duty in Afghanistan and in Germany with 173rd Airborne. After 3 years, he was discharged and returned to Southern California, where he was born and raised, to attend college on the GI Bill. He wanted to finish college and then re-enlist in the Army as an officer. With that goal in mind, Sam Hare enrolled himself in Orange Coast Community College, where he formed a friendship with Julie, who was 3 years younger than him. But just like many war heroes, Sam developed PTSD from the 3 years he served in the Army. Had he somehow snapped and committed the crime in a moment of passion? As Sam was nowhere to be found, detectives concluded that he was most likely on the run after murdering Julie in his own apartment. The suspicion only grew stronger when they found text messages on Julie's phone from Sam's number. At around 2:45 p.m. on May 21, 2010, Sam sent her a text saying he was going to help a friend and then head out to go to his parents' house. However, just 2 hours later, his tone changed when he sent her a couple of texts begging her to come to his place. From the tone of the messages, Sam seemed like a man in trouble. He was clearly upset about something. As a concerned friend, Julie agreed to meet Sam. She said she'd be there for him like a family. While Sam's family was dumbfounded by the findings and worried that his life was in danger, these texts made him look more guilty to the investigators. It showed that he planned for her to come over. Additionally, Sam's car and his passport were also missing from the apartment, leading investigators to believe that Sam was probably on the run. His passport was missing. His car was missing. I look at it every legal guys, this is obvious. If I say how he is going to be our killer. Yet investigators would soon find out that there was even more to this story. Flashing back to 8 years prior, in 2002, the then 18-year-old Sam Hare was charged with another heinous crime. He was accused of taking part, along with 17 other men and women, in the stabbing and beating death of 19-year-old Byron Benito in Canyon Country. Allegedly, on the night of January 15, 2002, Sam, who had been friends with Benito since childhood, picked Benito up from his house and led his unsuspecting friend to an area behind a mobile home park where he was attacked and killed by a group of suspected gang members. He was charged with murder. However, in the end, he was acquitted of those charges, but that didn't change the suspicion in the minds of the investigators. Although Sam's family did not believe in his guilt, investigators were almost certain that they were after the right person. As Sam was trying to use firearms, they considered him armed and dangerous and on the run. Believing that they had a dangerous killer on the loose, authorities put an APB out for Sam. Meanwhile, the Costa Mesa police began monitoring Sam's cell phone and credit card activities in an attempt to locate him. Cops got information that there had been 4 withdrawals made from ATMs in the days since his disappearance. His credit card was also used at a pizza delivery place in Long Beach, California, just 20 miles away from Sam's house. Police expected to see Sam on the surveillance cameras, but when the bank sent them footage from the ATM cameras, they couldn't believe whom they were seeing. It was a teenager wearing a hoodie and a cap, withdrawing money from Sam's bank account. Neither police nor Sam's parents were able to identify the kid. Investigators concluded that he was most likely helping Sam, either to get away or to hide. Either way, Costa Mesa police were desperate to track him down. On May 26, 2010, they received information that his credit card had been used at another pizza delivery, and they set about tracking the delivery driver. After obtaining the delivery address from them, police headed to the address to apprehend Sam, thinking that they'd finally found his hideout spot. When police stormed the house, expecting to find Sam, they instead found 17-year-old Wesley Freelich, along with some of his friends. Although suspected earlier, authorities almost immediately ruled out Wesley as a suspect, but he did still have Sam's credit card in possession. The teenager depicted a shocking story that investigators were not anticipating hearing. He was, in fact, given the credit card with full instructions to withdraw cash. However, it was not by Sam. He didn't even know Sam. Daniel Wozniak, a local theater actor whom Wesley met through community theater, had given them the credit card. Wozniak told Wesley that he was a bail bondsman and needed to collect money Sam owed. Perhaps any other person would have declined it, but as Wesley looked up to Wozniak as an older brother, without realizing the gravity of the situation, the 17-year-old boy agreed to help. In total, $1,900 was withdrawn from the account. The name Daniel Wozniak did ring a bell for investigators, as they'd found an invitation to his upcoming wedding in Sam's apartment. But who was this Daniel Wozniak, and what was his connection to Sam? Did he help Sam to get away, or was he an accomplice to the murder itself? Several questions were yet to be answered. 38-year-old Daniel Dan Patrick Wozniak was born on March 23, 1984, as the youngest of 3 boys. Daniel spent a lot of time with his grandparents after school, due to his parents' long work hours. Dan grew up in a luxurious home, and the family often took expensive vacations. He was described as a good kid in school, who mostly got very good grades. He used jokes, singing, dancing, and magic tricks to get attention from people. He loved to be the center of attention. Realizing that he had a natural talent for stage performance, Daniel started acting and singing in musicals in his early 20s. He was pretty casual about his plans for the future. He could never hold a job for long, which forced him to move from job to job with very low pay. However, as years passed, he kept his passion for acting alive and continued to work in theater. It was here, in one of his musicals, that he found the woman of his dreams, a fellow actress. After briefly dating, they decided to marry. On May 26, 2010, when police tracked down Wozniak, he was enjoying his bachelor party in Huntington Beach, California. But how was Daniel Wozniak linked to Sam Hare? As it turned out, he lived in the same apartment complex where Sam lived. Assuming that Wozniak had either helped Sam flee or hide, or had been complicit in Julie's murder, cops barged into the private bachelor party for Wozniak with an arrest warrant. The blood drained from his face as soon as he saw the cops, leading the detectives to believe that he knew more than he was letting on. Police took him into custody for questioning. In the interrogation room, at first, Wozniak claimed that his only crime was participating in credit card fraud and covering for Sam. He further told the investigators that he and Sam hatched a plan to pull out all of his money from his bank account with the help of Wesley, and then claim credit card theft. But Daniel claimed before they could carry out the plan, Sam made a shocking confession. He added that, after this confession, he dropped Sam off at a local shopping center and had not seen him since. Nonetheless, detectives believed he was still covering for Sam, and that he had more involvement in Julie's murder than he told the investigators. So detectives tried a different strategy. They took a DNA swab from Daniel, a strategy that made Daniel very nervous. He tried to collect his composure, but detectives could tell there was something wrong. Almost immediately, he started to add more details to the story. Tell me about the saying that you did. I told him that I needed to go see stuff from the theater. I said, don't help me with this, then you meant go on, I grant the gun. I didn't really mind to get that reverse put him back in a shot. Detectives realized that Wozniak was nervous that his DNA would show up at Sam's apartment. Although he tried to say otherwise, cracking under pressure, he kept changing his story. After a long pause, Wozniak said that he knew about Julia's murder, and he helped him get away. When detectives reminded him that they had his DNA, he reassured them that it was not going to show up on Julie's body. He was still holding on to the fact that he had nothing to do with the murder. Detectives were expecting that Wozniak would reveal more details when he suddenly decided he was done with the interview. But with so much at stake, detectives could not let him go easily without knowing the full details. They told Wozniak that he'd be arrested for the accessory to murder charge if he did not come clean and give them full details. Wozniak had a lot at stake too. He had a wedding scheduled in just 48 hours, and he did not want to miss it. Under pressure, Wozniak started to crumble. The story yet again changed a bit. Seeing that Wozniak was about to break, detectives hastened the process by bluffing about the DNA. Although in reality, DNA test results wouldn't be back for weeks, detectives claimed his DNA was found on Julie's body. Shockingly, he did not protest the claim. He rather said his DNA was on Julie's body because he was standing right over her body. As it turns out, Wozniak was not as good of an actor in the interrogation room as he was on the stage. As his lies fell apart, he dropped yet another bombshell. This was a major red flag for the detectives because only one gunshot wound was visible to the investigators at the crime scene. Only later, when an autopsy was performed, was it revealed that there was a second gunshot wound. This confession from Wozniak meant that he'd been there when she was killed, which made him an accomplice in the murder, and investigators could now officially detain him. Yet, even though Wozniak was in custody, detectives still had to find Sam, and Daniel refused to talk. While detectives were searching for any clues that could lead them to Sam Hare, sitting behind bars, Wozniak called his fiancée, Rachel Buffett. Whether Wozniak knew those conversations were being recorded or not, he was about to get caught in his own web of lies. As Rachel chose freedom over love, she told him that she was going to call detectives with more information. Wozniak knew he had to talk to the detectives before Rachel could. Suddenly, he was in a panic, desperate to strike the deal with the detectives that he refused only hours before. But what he told the detectives this time was beyond their imagination. For the first time, Wozniak was ready to break down the timeline of his diabolical murder plan, which started with a simple favor from a friend. On the fateful day of May 21, 2010, Wozniak asked Sam, who considered him a good friend, to help move some boxes at the Los Alamitos Theater attic in a local military base. While Sam was busy moving the boxes in the attic in a knelt-down position with his back turned to Wozniak, the cold-blooded monster pulled out a gun and shot him in the head once. Initially, Sam never knew what hit him. After realizing he'd been shot, he begged Wozniak to help him. Without a shred of hesitation, this merciless killer reloaded his gun and shot him a second time, killing him instantly. After killing Sam, he was still not finished. In a cold and composed manner, he did the unthinkable by texting Julie from Sam's phone and luring her to Sam's apartment. In the utmost callousness, he left Sam's body in the attic and went to perform his play, laughing, singing, dancing, as if he did not just murder an innocent man and lure another to the same fate. Later in the night, Wozniak snuck into Sam's apartment, and once Julie was inside the apartment, he shot her 2 times in the head. He then staged the crime scene to make it look like Sam fled after assaulting and killing Julie in his apartment. However, he still needed to make sure that no one found Sam. In desperation, he proceeded to commit one of the most depraved acts possible. He returned to the attic and dismembered Sam's hands and head in an attempt to conceal the deceased's identity. He disposed of them at a nearby park. But even after these heinous acts, seemingly without a care in the world, Wozniak once again returned to the theater. In several cast party photos detectives collected later, he can be seen laughing and joking with other members. But perhaps the motive remains even more twisted than the murders themselves. It all boiled down to money. Loaded behind killing Sam was money and Sam who killed. Wozniak always struggled with money and maintaining employment. At the time of the murders, he was behind 2 months in rent, on the verge of getting evicted. Additionally, he had no way of paying for the grand wedding or honeymoon he planned. And that's when he learned of the $62,000 Sam had in his savings for his time served in the military. He killed 2 innocent people in cold blood so that he could have a grand wedding and enjoy an expensive vacation. If the confession was not enough, police found the evidence bag that Rachel talked about on the phone with Wozniak, thanks to Wozniak's brother, Tim. Tim had instructions to get rid of the bag, but he instead threw it over the fence at his parents' house. That backpack was filled with incriminating evidence, including Sam Hare's financial details, passport, his bloody clothes, and, most stunning of all, the murder weapon. Wozniak's DNA was all over the items, suggesting that he, and he alone, committed the double homicide. There was a cornucopia of others, the DNA, extrajudicial cases, the victim's financial information, everything a prosecutor could ever warrant, but of course that also led us to the murder weapon himself. On December 16, 2015, at the end of his trial, which lasted just 5 days, Wozniak was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. On January 11, 2016, after only 1 hour of deliberation, in what's described as one of the shortest death penalty deliberations, the jury recommended the death penalty to a very deserving Daniel Wozniak. On September 23, 2016, the judge sentenced him to death. It seemed like there was no end of deception in this case. Detectives discovered years later that Wozniak's former fiancée, Rachel Buffett, not only knew about the murder plots, but she'd been deceptive to the detectives. Though she denied all these allegations, she was arrested and charged with 3 felony counts of accessory after the fact, based on allegations that she'd lied multiple times to police investigators. On September 12, 2018, she was convicted on 2 of those counts with a maximum possible sentence of 44 months, and on November 8, 2018, was sentenced to 32 months behind bars. She was released from jail sometime in 2019. Life snatched away from 2 innocent people. Life destroyed for their family members. And all of this, just so one maniac could have his dream honeymoon. The only closure that the families can get from this is that this monster is spending his last days where he can't hurt anybody else.